Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to talk for a little bit about the Los Angeles Clippers. Overall, I would say this has been one of the more promising years of the Kawhi Leonard, Paul George era. This has been for a number of reasons. One of the biggest ones, and probably the biggest one, has been the addition of James Harden. For years, I feel like the Clippers were kind of looking for this playmaking scoring guard, somebody that could slow the game down, help get the ball to Kawhi and Paul George, and just orchestrate the whole offense and prevent some of the collapses we had seen from the Clippers in this era. And James Harden felt like the perfect guy to do so. They were tied to him going back to the summer when he said, hey, Daryl Morey is a liar, and I don't really want to play for the Sixers anymore. And just a few games into the season, they went ahead and landed him. It was a trade that I really liked. A lot of people did. First 6 or 7 games did not go well with James Harden there. It was some of the worst Clippers basketball I've seen in a while. But after that rough stretch, they figured things out quickly, became one of the hottest teams in the NBA, looked like the best offense in the world. The defense wasn't perfect, but they were able to get stops when they needed to. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were playing great as that wing duo. Kawhi Leonard in particular was playing some of the best basketball we'd seen from him in a while. A lot of people started saying he could be a sleeper MVP candidate if the Clippers find a way to go up there and grab the 1 seed, which for a moment, they did go ahead and do so. James Harden was orchestrating the offense perfectly. They were fantastic, and they were right in the midst of a top 4 in the West with the Wolves, the Nuggets, and the Thunder as a team that was fighting for the 1 seed and home court advantage in the playoffs, and they quickly became one of the top picks to win the Western Conference. I saw a lot of people saying that if any team was going to dethrone the Nuggets as the West champs, and maybe even win the NBA Finals coming out of the Western Conference, it was going to be this Clippers team. Not to mention the Clippers for once were actually kind of staying healthy. If we look back to the past few seasons, it feels like Kawhi or Paul George always missed like 20 to 30 games. There was a year a couple seasons ago where Kawhi missed the entire season and Paul George had a big missing stint. When they get to the playoffs, usually someone gets hurt. It's just a theme with the Clippers, and specifically with this Kawhi PG era. But for this season, they for the most part have stayed on the court. Not still perfectly healthy, but way healthier than they've been in the past. And that's always been one of the big things with the Clippers is, sure, they look good on paper, but can they keep their guys on the court? And for the most part, they've done a pretty good job of that this season. Same thing with James Harden, who has been pretty injury prone in his recent career, but he stayed on the court for the Clippers, and because those guys have been out there, they were winning a bunch of games. I was someone who really bought into the hype like a lot of others did. I made not one, but 2 videos talking about this Clippers team, how great they were, why things are working the way that they are, and how ultimately this may be the best Clippers team of all time. And if there was any squad that was finally going to get them over the hump, it was going to be this team. So the hype really reached a pinnacle, I feel like, on February 6th when they went ahead and were the 1 seed. They were 34-15 and were 17-3 in their last 20 games. Just an absurd record to have over any period of time in the NBA. They were really exciting. They were a lot of fun. Things were clicking. Everything felt great over there in Clipperland. However, over the last month and some change, things have certainly faltered quite a bit. Since February 6th, the Clippers have played 15 games, and over that stretch, they're just 7-8, a game below 500, and that's just the 18th best record in the NBA over that stretch. So they're kind of struggling as of late. It's not an abysmal record or anything, but it's a far cry from what they were doing, which was eviscerating pretty much anybody in the NBA. Again, over that stretch, they had the best offense in the league, a defense that could get big stops when they needed to, and 3 All-Stars playing at an elite level that had their net rating through the roof. Over this recent stretch, they've gone down to just the 16th offense in the NBA. The defense has really struggled at the 25th mark, and they've got a net rating of -3, which is in the bottom half out of all NBA teams over this stretch. Over this 15-game period, the Clippers haven't had a lot of really convincing wins against great competition. They lost the Pelicans by double digits, lost by over 20 to both the Timberwolves and the Thunder coming out of the All-Star break, barely beat the Grizzlies by 6 points on the 23rd, blown out by the Kings, lost to the Lakers, did beat the Timberwolves by 1 point, which is a pretty solid win on the road, but then lost the Bucks a couple of times, and things have kind of come to a head last night with their loss to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Going into the game, this was a pivotal matchup for the Clippers. They were down 1-2 in the season series, so this was a chance for them to go ahead and tie it up, which could be big for tie-breaking implications at the end of the regular season if they caught up to the Timberwolves and made things interesting, trying to grab one of those top 3 spots. This is also a golden opportunity to do so and build up a little bit of ground in those standings because there was no Karl-Anthony Towns. He's out for a little bit with that injury, and if there's ever a chance to beat the Timberwolves and tie things up, this was their moment. So the Clippers really needed this game, and things started off pretty great. They built up a 22-point lead in the second quarter, primarily due to Paul George with 13 points, Norman Powell with 11, and Kawhi Leonard with 6, 2, and 2. But in the last 5 minutes and change of the second quarter, the lead was cut drastically from 22 points to 8, and by the end of the third quarter, the Timberwolves took the lead, and by the final few minutes of the fourth, the Wolves had completely flipped the script and built a 22-point lead of their own eventually, winning very, very convincingly. The Clippers put in the bench warmers with like 4.5 minutes left to go in this game. It was an incredible comeback by Minnesota, led primarily by Anthony Edwards, which, big shout to him. He's really been stepping up in the absence of Cat, and it's been cool to watch him continue to evolve his game over the course of the year, become the superstar that the Timberwolves need. But at the same time, it was an awful collapse by the Clippers. After they built up the 22-point lead, the defense completely fell apart. They had no answer for Anthony Edwards or really anybody on Minnesota's side. Harden and Paul George combined for just 13 points over the entire second half. They turned the ball over 12 times as the team just could not hold on to it. And worst of all, Kawhi Leonard didn't play beyond the first quarter. He actually ended up leaving the arena early due to some back spasms. He tried to fight through them and play through them in the game, but it became so uncomfortable that he had to sit out. And eventually, it was so uncomfortable he couldn't even sit on the bench, so he had to straight up leave the arena, which is very concerning to say the least. If this was a normal collapse against a catless Timberwolves team, it would be bad enough. The fact that they allowed a 44-point swing is inexcusable. But the most concerning part about the whole thing is what's going on with Kawhi Leonard, because he's been easily their best and most consistent player on both ends this season. After the game, they even asked Anthony Edwards, why was he able to go off in the second half? Why were they able to erase that lead and eventually build up one of their own? And he said they didn't have Kawhi Leonard out there. He is their best defender. He's really the only answer for me. And after he went out there trying to double team me, do whatever, but nothing really worked. And that's been true for a lot of this season. If Kawhi Leonard's not out there locking someone down, the Clippers defense really falters, not to mention on the offensive end. He's one of the most efficient scorers in the entire NBA and someone who's just immensely clutch. So they desperately need Kawhi Leonard. When he hasn't played, they haven't looked like the same team. As of right now, we don't really know how long Kawhi could miss with this issue or how much it's actually going to linger. How long has this even been going on in the first place? Tyronn Lue said he's unsure if Kawhi's going to make the 2-game road trip, with 1 game against the Pelicans and 1 against the Bulls. And without him this season, like I said, they haven't been very good. They could probably beat the Bulls without Kawhi Leonard. The Pelicans are going to be a lot tougher. I made a video yesterday talking about how that team is one of the hottest teams in the NBA right now. And if Kawhi misses any significant period of time, the Clippers are in a lot of trouble because they have one of the hardest remaining schedules out of anybody in the NBA the rest of the season. Even with Kawhi playing, they've still been slipping. With this recent 7-8 stretch, they're now a full 3.5 games back of the Thunder and Nuggets, who are tied for the 1 seed, a full 3 games back of the Timberwolves, who they really needed this win over to keep pace, and they're only 2 games up on the Pelicans at this point, who are right behind them, and again, who they could very well lose to on the road if Kawhi doesn't play. So if they lose that game, they're getting dangerously close to falling out of that top 4, when at one point when they grabbed that 1 seed, they're playing like one of the hottest teams in basketball. It felt like a foregone conclusion they would have home court advantage, and now I'm not so sure, especially if he misses, Kawhi that is, a significant portion of the rest of the season. They could fall pretty far because the West is stacked and all these other teams are starting to peak at the right moment, while the Clippers are drastically falling off. But Kawhi isn't the only guy to be concerned about. Russell Westbrook right now is missing a lot of time with a fractured hand. Their hope is he's back before the playoffs, but if he isn't, that's a big blow to them in a playoff series. He was great last year against Phoenix, and they're going to need that type of production in any type of run. And even for these games right now where they're fighting for seeding, there's a noticeable absence without him. Paul George has had this knee discomfort of some kind that has caused him to miss some games as of late here and there. Apparently it's been bugging him since right around January, which adds up because over the last 20 games or so, this has not been the same Paul George that we saw earlier on in the season, who ended up being named an All-Star. Over the last 20 games, he's putting up just 18.6 points per game, 4.9 rebounds, and 3.4 dimes, while shooting 43% from the field and just 33.8% from 3, while turning it over 2.1 times a night. There's been a noticeable decline from what he was doing earlier on this season to right now, and I have to imagine that the knee injury is factoring in some way. Maybe a lot of it is just a slump that he's on, but I feel like there's some kind of discomfort, and it's bothering him more than he's letting us know, and he's just trying to play through it because they need him to. They need guys to be out there in the court to fight for this seeding. But I worry because we've seen a lot of times where Paul George or one of these Clippers guys tries to push through an injury or there's something lingering, and by the time the playoffs roll around, it gets worse, it's more significant than we thought, and it causes them to miss a lot of time. And this has just been the story of the Clippers. It feels like it's happening again. They have this cycle where they show a bunch of promise, they get close to the playoffs or kind of into a playoff run, build up momentum, and then just completely unravel because some major injury strikes them in some way. It happened last year. They were looking great with Russ in town leading up to the playoffs. They were building up a lot of momentum. People were kind of getting convinced that this team could make some noise. And then Paul George gets hurt in a game against the Thunder. Kawhi Leonard gets hurt in the series against Phoenix, and they completely fall apart. The year before that, Kawhi missed the entire season with an ACL injury, and they missed the playoffs. And the year before, when Kawhi hurt his ACL, they were looking great. They were about to beat the Utah Jazz, face off against the Phoenix Suns, who they would eventually push to 6 games without Kawhi Leonard, but Kawhi tore his ACL, and without him, they just couldn't take down Phoenix. So they're cursed in some way. Ever since that bubble run, outside of that one, that was the only time they were healthy. Some major injury has continuously impacted them, and I'm worried this season it's starting to catch up to them as well. I just want to see them have one healthy run for once, and this feels like one of their better shots. If they can just stay healthy, maybe they finally get over the hump, but I'm once again starting to think they're not going to be able to do so. Also, even without the injuries, just the fact that they've been struggling so much as of late has kind of brought down my expectations of them. I've seen a lot of people kind of pump the brakes a little bit on the Clippers hype, which is very understandable. I do think when healthy, this is still one of the scary teams in the Western Conference because they've got so much experience. They're kind of a well-oiled machine, or at least they've shown they can be at times. I just don't know if they're actually going to have guys out there on the court. Hopefully Kawhi Leonard is good to go soon. Russ can come back. PG's just in a slump and the knee isn't actually bothering him that much. I also do worry about James Harden because, like I mentioned, I think earlier in the video, he's been kind of injury prone at some points in his career, so I'm worried something's going to catch up with him. But I just hope the Clippers actually get a full healthy playoff run for once so they can figure out what to do with this team, because who knows what changes they need to make if you can't ever get a run fully healthy with your squad. Plus, it's also extra important that they make some kind of noise because PG is going to be a free agent coming up this offseason, and if he ends up walking, that's a major death blow to the franchise. So we'll see what happens, but for the moment, the Clippers seem like they're in trouble. They're really faltering, and they're not looking like the juggernaut that they looked like earlier on in the season. I also would have liked to see the Clippers do something at the deadline, just add a little bit more depth to that front court in case of these injuries, or just in general, even when fully healthy. I feel like that's an area of the team that's lacking a little bit, but obviously too late for that now. They're just going to have to try and figure this thing out on the fly. With all that being said, those are my thoughts on the Clippers. Let me know down below in the comments what your thoughts are. Do you think the injuries are starting to catch up with them? Do you think I'm overreacting a little bit? Where do you think they finish in the standings? And if fully healthy, how far can they go in the playoffs? Do you still believe in this team? Does this recent struggle stretch worry you a little bit? Would love to know your thoughts. As always, love talking hoops with y'all down below in the comments. For right now, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Everyone, say it back.